What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Tuesday, November 7th, 2017. Getting into the week here. A lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on him with your comments and questions here. So let's get right on into it. There is still a firestorm of controversy surrounding Donna Brazile and her new book, and obviously the Clintons' loyalists are out there saying she's a turncoat, she's a rat, she's a snitch, she's a squealer, and all these other sort of characteristics there, because apparently to be a Democrat, you're expected to remain deaf and dumb, or at least stay quiet about what you see. And I'm sure probably the same is true in the interior workings of the GOP as well. But basically what has come on out, for a political memoir, normally they're boring, and they're basically self-justifications for what went on. And Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, is a perfect example taken to an extreme. But in this case, Donna Brazile came on out with a book that basically confirmed what most of us had already concluded was happening last year during the primaries. The Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton rigged the election against Bernie Sanders. And this is not just an insult to all of the Bernie Sanders supporters. It's an insult to every American who thinks that they're a voter and thinks that their vote counts. And we just got it slapped into our face last year. No, that's not true. The candidates are chosen by the party machinery, and you're just supposed to go along and go through this little theater exercise of voting in the primaries, even though it had no effect whatsoever. And it's an insult to every single American. It tells us we don't have any democratic institutions left in this country. It's all party machine, just like the old Soviet Union. So basically it comes on out that the Democratic establishment succeeded in doing to Bernie Sanders, let's be honest, the GOP establishment tried to do to Donald Trump. Remember when Trump came on in, he's the outsider and the media was against him, and all of the other GOP candidates, they're united against him. They shoved him over to the end on the debates there and tried to keep him out. And it didn't really work because the American people are sick and tired of politics as usual in Washington, D.C. And now it's starting to come on out just how dramatically, just how desperately Hillary and the Democrats worked to steal that primary for her. Now, Donna Brazile's book, and by the way, I've already pre-ordered my copy. Can't wait to see it. And the book is really about how the Democrats in general succeeded in blowing the election and losing to Donald Trump. And the revelations about Hillary and the DNC are just a part of it. But she has a dedication in the front of the book, as most writers do, which includes Seth Rich. And everybody is sort of arching their eyebrows about that because Donna Brazile has stated that following Seth Rich's murder, she was afraid for her own personal safety. Well, why would that be the case if Seth Rich's murder was a botched robbery? Just a random whatever that was going on. So there are still some secrets in there. Now, Donna Brazile was out there, and apparently Brazile said that she had a connection with the intelligence community who told her after Seth Rich was murdered she needed protection, including cameras, alarms, backup power at her house, and she heeded his advice. She took very careful precautions for her own personal safety. Now, apparently, at one point, Donna Brazile approached Hillary Clinton because the campaign had all this money, and Donna Brazile wanted to set up a reward fund to find his murderer. Hillary said no. Now, there is one other aspect we need to keep in mind here. Do you remember a guy named Rod Wheeler? This was a private investigator hired by the family of Seth Rich. And apparently, Donna Brazile made a phone call to the family demanding to know why there was a private investigator snooping into Rich's death. Of course, the family had every right to hire a private detective, and we don't know if Donna Brazile made this phone call herself or if she was ordered to. to find out what was going on. But remember when it turned out Rod Wheeler was on this case, everybody panicked over at the Hillary campaign. And, of course, when Donna Brazile was with CNN, she was the one who leaked the CNN questions for one of the debates to Hillary Clinton. So she's not squeaky clean, but she's starting to come clean on areas where there's a significant amount of interest. Now, Tucker Carlson reported last night that according to his sources, CNN management ordered their reporters, their prostitutes, their correspondents, to discredit former DNC interim chair Donna Brazile over her revelations that made Hillary Clinton look bad. They went on the attack against Donna Brazile. Because if you think about it, it makes CNN looking bad for having supported and protected Hillary Clinton all along. So don't expect any cooperation on the corporate media. They were hand in glove with the Hillary campaign, and they will not give this any coverage, and so far they haven't. They're absolutely in lock goose step with the Hillary campaign to protect the legend, to protect the legacy. And it's not going to work because more and more people are coming over to the independent media to find out what's really going on, because of all the times the corporate media has lied to us all, like Saddam's nuclear weapons. Now, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about Donna Brazile's revelations about the Hillary campaign and how last year's primary was, in fact, rigged for Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders. Maybe this was the DNC's way of teaching Bernie Sanders about socialism. We're going to take away the votes that you earned, and we're going to give them to Hillary Clinton. Maybe. But interestingly enough, former Clinton advisor Doug Schoen is now out there saying it is time for a special prosecutor to investigate Clinton. This is one of Clinton's people. And it's in response to the revelation that the former director of the FBI, James Comey, had modified his original statement on the Clinton email investigation to call her extremely reckless and try and distance himself from the language of Title 18, which says negligence and carelessness are grounds for prosecution under Title 18. All right, let's take some phone calls. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, how's Bizarro World treating you today?
Well, it's about as bizarre as it always is.
I wonder if that ever gets old for you. I'm calling in. Supposedly there's going to be a terror attack sometime this week, and it's supposed to be Yemenis nationals, but it's actually controlled by our own CIA.
Yeah, I would imagine pretty much all the terror attacks are controlled by the CIA or the FBI domestically, because at this point, it's becoming very obvious that virtually all of the terror attacks are false flag operations.
Yeah, and this what I'm specifically talking about goes back to February of last year when Trump ordered the SEAL team raid into Yemen, and they made a big stink about it, and John McCain was trying to discredit. This is actual information coming from Yemen about not only with the Las Vegas shooting, how the Saudis were, a paramilitary group out of Saudi Arabia was involved with that, but also that there's going to be an upcoming attack sometime this week.
Okay.
Run by the same people. I didn't know if you had heard it when off of InfoWars earlier today. Alex was reporting with a guy named Jake or Zach, supposedly part of special operations. But I just wanted to pass the word to you in case if something does pop off. They're saying Yemenis nationalists, but it's CIA controlled.
Well, I can understand why they'd want to do that right now, because American support for the U.S. support of Saudi Arabia in Yemen is definitely failing. And so it would make sense that if they want to escalate that war in Yemen, that they've got to have a convenient Yemen terror attack.
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, if anything does pop off, hey, man, I didn't want to be the first to tell you, but, I found it to be quite interesting. And with this whole Donna Brazile thing, we knew this, and I hope Hillary by Christmas gets put in jail, as well as everybody that colluded with them to cover this whole election fraud up. I mean, we all knew this. last year, and why I just don't understand why it's now coming to light. Now. I mean, it's obvious she stole it from Sanders. Obvious. I mean, everything's just flat out obvious, and everything that they've ever talked about, man, goodness usually finds a light to shine on the evil, and they scatter right like rats.
Well, absolutely. Now, I'm sure that some of the underlings may be going to prison. I mean, Anthony Weiner's already in jail. But Hillary and Bill, they'll never see the inside of a jail cell. If push comes to shove, they will simply flee the country. Most of the Clinton Foundation money is already in satellite foundations in other countries. So they've already gotten the money out. And they're just going to, they'll skedaddle to someplace without extradition. And it's rather amazing how many countries don't have extradition agreements with the United States that they can just sort of pick from.
Absolutely. Hey, I hear Haiti likes Hillary and Bill. Maybe they should go there.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be welcomed with open arms down there. Anything else?
Right. You have a great and wonderful day, and keep a lookout on the Yemenis national thing this week.
Well, we'll keep a focus on it, but there's a lot of other stuff going on here right now. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Leslie in Idaho. Aloha, Leslie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just had one comment to make. It was about Hillary's book, What Happened, and I was thinking that you need to write a book in rebuttal to hers and call it What Really Happened and list all of her crimes. Wouldn't that be clever?
Well, that would be very clever, but of course all of the writing I've done on that topic is already available for free on the website, so I doubt anybody would actually buy the book. I mean, I've been toying with the idea. I'm still trying to finish up Blueprint for the New America in my copious amounts of free time. And then after that, I might just, pen out basically the 24 years that Claire and I have been involved in this virtual conflict with the Clintons and the narcocracy. But again, I'm not sure anybody would be that interested.
Is the first one you listed, it's actually going to be a book?
Yeah, it's actually going to be a book.
Okay, great. Let us know when it comes out.
Oh, well, absolutely, when it's available for sale.
For free on Amazon.
Okay, well, like I said, I got to get the thing written first, and then I'll worry about all that other fluffy stuff afterwards. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Mike, if I had a time machine, I'd go back, grab George Washington, bring him back here, and let him write a book on what happened after he sees what's going on.
Yeah, boy, I don't think he would recognize this country. And he would probably say, this is what resulted from what we did. We should have stayed hooked up with Britain.
Hey, Mike, remember the Podesta emails? I remember one of the emails said, they were talking about Bernie Sanders, and it said we have leverage on him. So let me tell you, Hillary Clinton will never see the jail cell, neither will Bush's, Bill, or any of those that small tribe. They have blackmail on everybody. They're part of that, like you said, the notocracy. They're untouchable. They're untouchable.
Well, they're not untouchable anymore. We're touching them, and they're very, very nervous. But they have the resources to simply escape the country. And I'm thinking that if this starts to really come apart, there's going to be a major bug out of all the top players, and they'll leave the underlings behind to face the consequences. And that'll be fine. We'd all like to see Hillary in jail. It would be nice. It would be icing on the cake. But my real target, if you will, is to get that corrupting narcocracy out of our political system. To bring that crashing down and start that long, slow, walk back up the road to a true constitutional republic with a democratically elected government, with honest elections, term limits, and the system basically designed the way it was originally, where all the power is out with the states and the counties and the cities, and we've got a very weak central government whose role in the national life is limited to national defense and arbitration between the states, because Thomas Jefferson's vision was a brilliant one, but even he understood that politicians, being the corrupt creatures they are, that his grand experiment was not going to last. And he himself predicted that there would have to be a revolution somewhere down the road to clear out the corruption.
And no lobbyists, Mike. All lobbyists should be banned from Washington, D.C., a 50-mile radius. And the NSA should be listening in to all the senators and congressmen's phone calls.
I'm sure that they are. I'm sure that they are. You know, that's how they get the goods on people. You know, there is a legitimate function for lobbyists, and certainly lobbyists for issues like health care, you know, the environment, better schools, and so forth. I think there's a legitimate role. What we need to do is limit how much money lobbyists can be handing to the politicians, so that the lobbyists are returned to a role of presenting information only, and not just out there buying influence left and right. We have to bring back all the limits on campaign donations. We have to overturn the Citizens United decision that says corporations are legal persons for the purpose of political contributions, which was complete nonsense. I mean, the entire Capitol Hill has been turned into a giant shopping mall where corporations can go in and just pick up whatever congressman they want.
Mike, I got 3 more quick things about Harvey Weinstein using former Mossad agents as like agents of, you know, of threatening people or digging up stuff. And I know you could probably talk about that later. And Mike, what's your take on Trump on this? I know this is all about economics, but every country he's going to, it's like buy U.S. weapons. But this is what we've become. We're a welfare and warfare state. There's no infrastructure talk at all, like to build. It's just selling weapons.
Well, here's the problem. America's weapons have been exposed lately as being overpriced junk, and more countries are turning to Russia. I mean, look at the grief they gave Turkey for wanting to buy the S-400 missile instead of the more expensive and less reliable American missiles. I mean, that missile they pulled out of the launch tube, and of the remaining 59, half of them missed the target completely, and the ones that hit the target didn't hit anything important. The airbase was back in operation 24 hours later. Now, every government, every military on Earth was looking at that display and saying, okay, we got to find someplace else to buy our weapons. And Russia and China are out with these much less expensive, much more capable platforms. And people are saying, yeah, we need to go where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Yeah, Mike, I just heard a report that, I think it was Denmark, the Ministry of Defense is questioning the F-35's, like, abilities. I just read that article today about the F-35 from them. And, Mike, I was reading another article about the Saudi army is starting to loudly complain about what's going on in Saudi Arabia. So what can happen with the oil prices if something happens over there?
If something happens to Saudi Arabia, I mean, the oil prices are already starting to go up. But, yeah, if there's a major upheaval in the Middle East of any kind, yeah, oil prices are going to go right through the roof, and we're all going to feel the pain at the gas pumps. But, yeah, I've been hearing that Solomon's rather dramatic moves as Crown Prince have angered a lot of the more traditional-minded Saudis, and that includes a lot of the military. He could be looking at a military coup d'etat, you know, before he even gets to wear that crown.
Yeah, I wonder if all the Saudis are under house arrest at the Ritz-Carlton are getting room service. They're all laying on mattresses from what I saw in the pictures.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for all the money that Saudi Arabia's government is going to take from them, something like $30 billion, they're going to confiscate. Yeah, they ought to be getting room service.
Yeah, Mike, you got a real problem over there because remember, some of those Saudi, well, a lot of the, not a lot, but there's Saudis that are linked to the Wahhabist sect over there. They got this kind of agreement, and, you know, he's really barking up the wrong tree if he pushes this too far, you know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but keep your gas tank filled.
Yeah, you got it there. Yeah, I'm having a serious rethink about Crown Prince Solomon, especially in light of his obvious efforts to join in the new war agenda against Iran, against potentially Lebanon, and potentially a renewed attack into Syria. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'd like to share a little bit of an insight with you. I'm sure probably most of you have already figured this out. But we literally are in a virtual civil war. And it's on the internet. It's in the independent media against the corporate media, and that's a good place for it to be because we don't have to worry about stray bullets, hitting the kids in the streets or anything. But it is a real war. It's an information war. And the other side has got millions of dollars, and they're probably already phoning up their friends and saying we need another few million to shout down that independent media or we're all going to go to jail. And that's why we need your help. So with a reference to that commercial that you heard over the last break, I want you to grab your pencil and paper here because I'm going to give you some contact information because we need your help. We're not in this line of work to get rich. None of us are getting rich. We're here because we're trying to restore the Republic. So if you are able to help, and we need it, the postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302. The city is Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone on in with a donation by credit card or debit card or something, the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And we thank you in advance. But this is a pitched battle right now. This is as intense as it has ever been. My server is getting hit harder than even before the election because Hillary and her people, they are afraid. Now, I'm sure in some small corner of her brain, Hillary still thinks she's got a political future in this country. Most pundits are saying, no, she's politically dead. She's too badly damaged to ever come back again. But they're feeling cornered, they're feeling desperate, and they're fighting as hard as they can to shut down the independent media, to shut down the voices that are out there trying to get the truth out to the American people, while the corporate media is out there saying, oh, there's nothing over here. Let's go look at the Texas shooting, and let's go look at this, and let's go look at that. Because the corporate media was complicit in everything that Hillary Clinton and the DNC were doing to Bernie Sanders last year. They're never going to report on this honestly, because to do so would mean they'd have to first stand up and say, yeah, we were part of that problem. Now, there are some voices emerging from the corporate media that are trying to get the truth out. Tucker Carlson, obviously, Hannity. But overall, the corporate media, we mentioned that story earlier in the day where Tucker Carlson is saying his sources have told him CNN management is telling all of their prostitutes and correspondents to go on the attack against Donna Brazil. So now's the time to push as hard as we can. Now, story coming out of Sputnik News, revelations confirming 2016 collusion rock the Democratic National Committee. As well, they should. And they need to realize they're in serious trouble. Their credibility is on the line based on how they're going to deal with this. And it looks to me like they're trying to find a way to untangle from Hillary Clinton. But supporters of Bernie Sanders are outraged at Donna Brazil's confirmation that the top officials at the DNC rigged that primary process for Hillary Clinton. And all voters ought to be equally outraged because what they have just done is told us our votes don't count. When we go to the polling places, it's all theater. It's an illusion to make you think that you have some control over the course of this government. But we already know that's not the case. Because election after election after election, we'll vote for the candidate that makes the greatest promises, but the course of the nation remains the same. More war, more wealth inequality, more dictatorship, more control, erosion of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Even Trump, supposedly the outsider, has not done anything to change the course of the nation itself. So you should be upset. You should be angry over what Hillary and the DNC did. And I'm not saying that the GOP didn't do it as well. We should find out. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, more voices are starting to speak up about what happened last year. And we've got Donna Brazil and her book and a lot of other people coming on out. The latest one now is from Tulsi Gabbard. Hawaii's own Tulsi Gabbard, who had actually been a vice chair during last year's campaign. And she basically came on out and said the deep financial debt, closed-door decision-making, complete lack of transparency, and unethical practices are now front and center, and Tulsi is absolutely correct. At least as far as the independent media is concerned, this is front and center. This is a huge scandal. This goes way beyond Watergate, where Nixon was just bugging the other candidates. We're talking about literally hijacking and suborning the entire Democratic Party to Hillary's ambitions. This is bigger than Watergate, and it's only one of 3 equal scandals. We've got Primary Gate that we're talking about right now. We still have the Uranium One scandal. And then we have the dodgy dossier scandal, Dossier Gate. Now, one of Bernie Sanders' officials has now gone public saying that they were literally told to support Hillary during the campaign or face a backlash like Donna Brazile is receiving now. This is Teslin Figaro on the Hannity Show, saying that they were literally being threatened and browbeat into supporting Hillary Clinton. That's not a campaign, that's thuggery. All right, let's take some more phone calls. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Thank you.
Mac Barn. I'm trying to figure out one thing, and it's almost fruitless. That after so many decades that people go through the voting process and the primary process, this process, that process, as far as the so-called election rigged deal goes, and all that they haven't come to finally realize that each time they do it, nothing is ever solved or taken care of, and so forth and so on for the everyday person, and nothing ever changes in D.C. for that matter, the District of Criminals. That what they're really doing, and they haven't figured it out yet, is they're actually voting for who they think the best actor or actress was, regardless of what political body that they so-called represent, for that matter. Between the two-headed snake, of course, mind you. But I'm still trying to figure out why people keep going for that, voting for who they think was the best actor or best actress in the whole fiasco.
We have been brainwashed since we were children in school, social studies, to think that we have honest elections and that we really have a say in how this country is being run. And those of us who are, let me finish, those of us who are students of America's real politic understand that's not the case. But now, because of this revelation, this scandal last year, all Americans are now coming to understand their votes don't really matter. Not just the Democratic votes, but the GOP votes as well. And that means we're living in a dictatorship. Our elections are as phony and fraudulent as the ones they used to hold in the Soviet Union.
Now, that's a horrible thought, Michael. Now, the question is, once people have finally figured that fiasco out, and that realization you just stated, which you did quite eloquently for that matter, it's better than I would have for that matter, the question now is when are people going to start to realize that, I wonder what would happen if I just stopped practicing the process of going and volunteering my time and energy to go and voting for the best of 2 actors or actresses, for that matter, and stop doing it all together. And then see what happens in bringing the whole process to a grinding, screeching halt. Then what would happen?
Well, I would like to see that happen, but what I think is a better thing to happen, because if we stay home and don't vote, then the machine just goes on as it did before. They only need a handful of people to come on out. There's no quorum required for a presidential election. If only 3 people vote and 2 of them vote for Donald Trump's the president. So the machine keeps on going. What we really need is for every single American citizen, every single voter, to stand up right now and demand that Donald Trump's Commission on Election Integrity actually start addressing these issues. Because if we don't have honest elections, then it's time to basically, quit this system.
Well, I got a quick question for you then. When you mentioned about the machine, can you define what the machine is that you were referring to?
Well, machine is a generic term that is used to describe a political party that is basically operating on its own autonomously, a party machine. or somebody's machine, the Clinton machine. It's basically the network of enablers and supporters and assets that are trying to sway politics in a particular direction. So that's what we mean by the machine. We could also substitute the narcocracy in there because, as you point out, in the District of Criminals, they don't want anything to change. They have worked for decades to create a system that works for them. Endless wealth, amazing amounts of power, all kinds of perks. They can go on down to Jeff Epstein's island in the Caribbean, have a little jollies out there. Nobody's going to call them on that. And the American people completely controlled, mind controlled by the corporate media. That's what they wanted, and they worked for it, and they don't want to give that up. And that's why now that it's all starting to crumble, they're starting to panic over there.
Well, that's true. However, mind you one thing, Michael. It's apparent that somebody needs to throw a monkey wrench into that machine, regardless of how many machines there are, and basically bring them to a screeching, grinding halt, period, and let it be done with, because it obviously does not work for the everyday person. It might work for the D.C. folks, but and the lobbyists and their cohorts and so forth ad nauseum, which is a cascade effect or domino effect, if you will, which cascades out to the rest of the world, for that matter, unfortunately. But the everyday person, if they're finally waking up, then, hey, throw a monkey wrench into that machine and get rid of it, trash it, get it over with.
Well, nothing is going to start throwing a monkey wrench into those political machines more than some of these people going to jail and turning state's evidence.
I would wholeheartedly agree if they're ever arrested and actually hauled off to jail. If that were to happen, believe me, you'd see one tickled person that would be just tickled all over, tickled pink. It'd be like, I would throw a major party if that were to happen. I'd be so overjoyed, I'd be in tears.
Oh, I've been saving up for the party, the victory party, when we finally succeed in cracking open that narcocracy to public view. And, of course, at my age, it's not going to be a particularly wild party, ginger ale, pretzels, But, I've lowered my expectations for the victory party as the years roll by.
I'm going to keep that thought neutral because I'm not going to call a halt that too quickly on that. But,
all right.
Hey, it's called optimism. Have a great one.
All
Later.
Right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over now to Brett from South Mississippi. I think it's Mississippi. Aloha, Brett. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike Rivero. First of all, I just want to say, good afternoon, and you do a fantastic job with your radio show.
Thank you.
You may remember me from a few years ago. We were Facebook friends and did some activism together, but maybe not. My question for you this afternoon is concerning Barbara Hartwell. I was trying to get in touch with her. Are you familiar with her?
I've heard the name, but I don't have any contact information for her. I'm sorry.
Okay, I have some contact info. And then the reason I called, I'm having some trouble with the NSA and the DIA. It's been going on for about a decade now. Mm-hmm. And you're a very wise man, and I was hoping either you or her could help me. Harassment to the point when I try to call congressmen, phone calls are rerouted. When I call the FBI, they say there's nothing they can do about the threats and the harassment that are taking place to me. So maybe some of your listeners could help me, or you could. But I know she's a black ops survivor, and some of the things she's dealt with, she could help me with personally. If you somehow contact her, you might mention that on the air or something one day. But,
I don't have any contact information for her, and I get a lot of emails from people who are saying they're having problems with their communications. And is it nefarious interference? It could be, but let's also recall that we're living in a nation that is in major decline right now. And I was talking with somebody earlier today just on the fact that ever since Microsoft bought Skype, Skype has become very unreliable. They were having major problems yesterday. I've had situations where we're not able to do interviews because Skype is just, the system is breaking down. The technology, the infrastructure is breaking down. And it could be that your misrouting of the call when you call your congressman isn't nefarious, but it's simply either bad equipment, making, bad connections, or improperly trained people who are working on it. So I tend to go for Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is the best. But I understand about harassment and stuff because a long time ago I used to get a lot of that. My attitude was I'm going to ignore it, and eventually they got tired, and that was kind of the end of it. And I did report to the police and the FBI, and they did go after one of the people who was doing it. But, at the end, it's almost like it wasn't worth the waste of time to do so. But if you think Barbara Hartwell can help you, then you need to get in touch with her. I can't help you on that. I don't have any contact information. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I agree with the last caller. You're funny, but you're funny, haha, not funny, cuckoo. Just to clarify that.
Okay. I don't think anybody was assuming the wrong one.
Hey, regarding the boy who cried wolf, the government has been responsible for so many false flag mass shootings that even if they didn't do this last church one, they're still going to get the blame for it. And that's the cost of doing false flags and lying about them all the time. And the main thing I wanted to mention is just wanted to comment on your story a few days ago about the geoengineering for proposing to spray sulfur in the atmosphere to combat global warming.
Yes.
I just wanted to comment on that I'm an expert on aerosol spraying for the purposes of affecting climate, and I just wanted to mention that it does not reduce global warming, because what it does is it will locally cool down a region. If it's high noon and you spray in a certain area, it can locally cool it down. But then at nighttime, when all the heat is radiating back out of the mountains and out of the waters and out of the streets and back up into the atmosphere, into outer space, it then gets bounced around on these particles, and some of it gets deflected back down, some of it gets held inside this cloud, and it actually has a net warming effect. And especially when you're talking about the more common substance that is being proposed, which is aluminum oxide, which gives it that more traditional cloud color. That stuff is metallic. It has very many different reflective surfaces, and that just bounces the thermal radiation around like crazy. And so don't let anybody tell you
it's
that
also going to cinder down. It's also going to cinder down to the ground eventually, and it's a highly toxic compound if it gets into the food chain. But again, it was just a wild-eyed suggestion. They're still out there trying to push the global warming threat, the global warming danger, with all these stories about this could be a possible solution, but we're going to need to charge carbon taxes to pay for it all. And it's all a scam, just like all these green energy projects that came along. Following Al Gore and the global warming, the Solyndra debacle.
Yeah, you're right. It takes about 2 years for the particles to come down. If they're dispersed at about 30,000 feet, it takes about 2 years on average to get to the ground.
Okay, there's one. Hang on, let me just do one thing, and then I got to let you go. There's also the reality. There is no such thing as a 100% efficient transmitter, optical transmitter, or reflector. Perhaps I should use the terms refractor or reflector. There is no such thing as a 100% efficiency. And that means that whatever somebody is talking about putting up into the sky, it's going to be absorbing a certain amount of the radiation hitting it and converting it to, ta-da, heat.
Yeah, so it's promoting global warming, not fighting it. That's the big lie. And the only reason they're admitting they're leaking this idea out now is because they're about to get caught, because public awareness is reaching critical mass where they're going to get in trouble. So they're trying to legalize it and pretend they haven't been doing it, but they've been doing it for a long time. I know we disagree on that point.
We definitely disagree.
And, thank you very much.
All right, well, we're going to let you go here, and yes, we definitely do disagree on that. And you need to understand that in an effort to try and damage the credibility of the independent media, The government propagandists put out a lot of nonsense, and they feed it to gullible people who will turn around and say, oh, wow, this is just really incredible. And that includes the Apollo moon landings being faked, which has now been debunked because the Apollo landing sites have all been imaged by satellites from other countries, not all of whom are friendly with us. HARP, remember, HARP is going to change the atmosphere. No, it wasn't. It was an attempt to create a synthetic imaging radar that could bounce off the ionosphere, and it failed miserably, I might add. And of course, the whole chemtrail thing, or UFOs. They're trying to get people dragged off into these other areas so that you're not paying attention to what you need to be paying attention to, which are these political scandals that are affecting your life, and more importantly, could result in your children being sent off to another war of conquest. And that's what we should all be focused on. Now, getting on back to the scandals here, as you know, in addition to Primary Gate, there is Dossier Gate. And the revelation that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC, which we now understand were operating as one and the same, paid $12 million for this dodgy dossier, which has been completely discredited. And now they're looking at the possibility that because the DNC Clinton campaign went through a law firm and had them hire Fusion GPS to hire Christopher Steele to come up with this piece of nonsense, that actually amounts to money laundering because the campaign records don't show the payments to Fusion GPS. And now they're trying to get the Fusion GPS banking records on the suspicion that Fusion GPS was paying reporters to run this story of the dossier to harm Donald Trump. Payola is what it's called. If you're as old as I am, you remember the big payola scandal where record companies were paying radio disc jockeys to play certain songs to boost sales. It was a big stink. This is more of the same thing. And meanwhile, of course, the major TV news networks are not talking about Dossier Gate at all, let alone its connections to the Clinton campaign. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here today. And these are interesting times. Interesting, not necessarily meaning pleasant or pleasurable, but still interesting here. Trey Gowdy is out there doing what should be done. And now he is focusing on former FBI Director James Comey. He's calling him before the committee to basically talk about the decisions he made during the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. And that is going to be a hearing worth watching, because how is Comey going to justify that he wrote the memo exonerating Hillary before the investigation was even underway? Now, everybody's saying, well, it's all over and done with. No, it isn't. No charges were ever filed. Hillary Clinton did not get her day in court. There's no double jeopardy here. She can still be charged. They can have indictments handed down based on the information that Comey admitted the FBI had regarding these Title 18 felony violations. And now the revelation that he edited his original letter exonerating Hillary Clinton to try and sort of move the description of her activities away from the exact language used in Title 18 regarding reckless and careless handling of classified documents, tells us he did know that was an issue, that intent is not required by Title 18. And I've already heard Trey Gowdy challenge Comey on the fact that Title 18 does not require bad intent. So they're going to hold him to account on this. And that's going to dump the mess on Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who unfortunately keeps recusing himself. Every time somebody says, why aren't you involved? I have to recuse myself. I must recuse myself from all of this. All right, well, if you're not going to do your job, step down. Resign. Let somebody else come on in there who will do the job. Let's get Larry Klayman up there as Attorney General. Or let's get Trey Gowdy up there as Attorney General. We don't want more explanations and apologies. We want indictments. We want charges. We want court trials. We want convictions. And we want to see some of these people tarred, feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid moose. Nothing less will serve. And apparently Sessions is also being called before a congressional hearing yet again to explain why he's not doing anything. Now, right now, the corporate media, though, is showing no signs of repentance, no signs of changing their game, and the degree of desperation that they are showing to just somehow make Trump look bad hit a new low regarding this video of Trump feeding the koi at the Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, where Abe took Donald Trump to feed the koi, and what actually happened was that Abe and Trump were using spoons into these little boxes full of fish food to throw the food out there. Now, when we come back from station identification, I'm going to tell you what CNN did with this and how underhanded they really are. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking about this latest desperate attempt by CNN to make Donald Trump look bad, and it is so picky and trivial, you wonder why they bothered, but they did. So, again with the backstory, Abe took Trump over to the Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, where they have a koi pond. Koi is a fish. In fact, the little goldfish you get at the store, those are baby koi. And so they went to feed the koi. And you get a little box of food, and you get a little spoon, and you just put a little of the food into the water, and you watch the fish do what the fish are going to do. No problem. And then as they got down to the bottom of the boxes, Abe poured out the rest of his box into the water, and so did Donald Trump. And somebody said, we've got to make Trump look like he was a moron on this. So they basically ran the story as Trump goes to feed the koi, dumps whole box of food into the pond. And when they showed the clip, they edited out the part where Abe had emptied out the remainder of his fish food into the pond as well. Now, here on the island of Oahu, over on the windward side, we have a recreated Japanese temple, the Byodo Inn. And they have a koi pond. And Claire and I have been there many, many times. And we will feed the koi. And that's how it is. You throw a little at a time because you want to lengthen out the show. And then when you get down to the bottom, you just empty out. In our case, it's a bag, not a box. And the fish are going to eat it. It doesn't harm the fish. It's not bad for the fish. And CNN just pushed this agenda of making Trump look stupid. And it was picked up and run all over the corporate media. And they got burned on that. Now, apparently, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has now confirmed that Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, personally pressured her to help a foundation donor. So, again, more and more people are speaking up about this very inappropriate behavior by Hillary Clinton. Now let's get on over to Robert Mueller, who is out there still trying to turn indictments against Manafort and Gates for stuff they did for Ukraine before they joined the Trump campaign into some kind of a damning indication that, yes, Russia and Trump were working together, were colluding to steal the election away from Hillary Clinton. And the fact that Manafort and Gates is all that he's come up with basically tells us he's failed. He's wandered way outside his original mandate, and he's found nothing. But he's not looking at anything Hillary did. He's not looking at Uranium One. And as it turns out, attorneys who work for Mueller as head of the FBI during the Uranium One deal signed off on it. And some of them are now working for him under the special counsel office. They're all dirty with the Uranium One deal. And remember, it has come on out that all the way back in 2015, the FBI had an open investigation into corruption, bribery, kickbacks in the Uranium One deal. And even knowing there was an ongoing FBI investigation, these lawyers signed off on the Uranium One deal. And now they're working for Mueller, trying to find some way to get Donald Trump before they get arrested. Now, Judicial Watch is now out there questioning Mueller's investigation, saying that he has exceeded his mandate. And we already know the investigation, the special counsel office, is actually illegitimate because the special counsel law on which it's founded expired some years ago. And even if it was still in effect, it requires a preliminary investigation to establish probability that something has happened, requiring a special counsel. And Rosenstein just said, Mueller's the special counsel, go get him. Fishing expedition. And they haven't found anything. All right, let's grab a quick phone call. Jeff in Toronto, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing okay.
Before I begin, I just wanted to give a shout-out to all the baseball fans in the world. Roy Halladay died in a plane crash today. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for the memories, and God bless your family for all you did for the Toronto Blue Jays, and after that for the Philadelphia Phillies. Very tragic end to a great life, and I just want to say it was you're one of my heroes, and I love you, and be with God. So he used to be the pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Yeah, actually, I got the headline. I got the headline from the Boston Globe newspaper feed, but for anybody who's a baseball fan, it's sad when anybody dies. However it happens. Of course, you know what's going to happen. There are going to be people on Twitter saying, "What information did he have on Hillary Clinton?"
Well, maybe he did. I was going to talk about some free trade issues that President Trump was probably going to be discussing in the Asia-Pacific region there. But I was listening to your comments earlier, and you're quite right. I mean, about Donna Brazil, and she's trying to walk back her comments about the things that she already wrote in her book. And she's actually crossing herself over, saying, she's trying to walk back these comments that she already put into print. So it seems a bit silly, and the whole Democratic Party is totally imploding. So I guess if I was a Republican, I'm more of a libertarian, with a libertarian streak kind of person, so it's all great for me. And I did support President Trump all the way. And I would support you on what you said there earlier about how they were making President Trump look really silly. I think they did that to President Carter in his early days, too.
Yes.
Somebody they didn't particularly care for very much, who was a bit of an outsider, and they try to wreck your image or whatever. And I just had a question for you. Hillary Clinton is basically in the death throes, not only of her political career, but I think she's actually thinking that she may actually go to prison. And there's so much out there. I was watching Hannity the other day, and and the Tucker there, and they're all saying that it's so ubiquitous, all this information now. I mean, President Trump, I think when he gets back from Asia, he's going to have to confront this problem about, are we going to have to, every time I call, I make these comparisons to what happened to President Nixon. He was firing people, but he did that because he was actually fraudulently participating in these acts. And so I think Donald Trump is a little bit worried about, if I fire this prosecutor, it's going to be like Archibald Cox or something like that back in the 70s when that happened. And I think he's trying to avoid that. But I think that
I would agree I would agree on that one. But what Trump can do is push for some special counsels or investigators to go after the Clintons right now, because it's very obvious to the American people right now that the official machinery of the government is totally focused against Donald Trump, and they're giving Hillary and the DNC and all these people just a get out of jail free card. And we've been seeing that going all the way back to when Comey basically allowed Hillary to walk on the email scandal and the Title 18 violations, and the American people are saying, what the heck is going on here? This is supposed to be a government of laws, not of powerful individuals. And, coupled together with the revelation that last year's primary elections on the Democratic side and possibly the GOP side were being rigged, and meaning our votes don't matter, we're all disenfranchised now. And that ought to make people very, very angry, because if the government isn't playing by the rules, if they're not keeping to that contract, the Constitution, then we're under no obligation to do anything this government tells us to do.
I usually listen to conservative-minded podcasts, and there is one kind of liberal slanted one, or one in particular called the Jimmy Dore Show.
Yes.
And for liberals, he's actually quite an honest person. I don't agree with much of his politics, of course, Jimmy Dore, but he's actually quite funny, and he's actually quite honest about how he brings it up, about how Bernie got ripped off and all that. And I think everyone with half a brain knew that Bernie had the nomination taken right out from under his feet, because all you had to do was look at the stadiums that he was filling, and Hillary Clinton couldn't even fill up a
bicycle
a
store,
high school basketball court there, and no one really was supporting him. And they're still counting the votes, and ostensibly in California, and the whole thing is so corrupt. And so when the president was going around calling her crooked Hillary, I mean, obviously that there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's not just crooked, but I mean that this is just like, I was listening to Hannity last night, and I think he's right. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Like there's going to be like a watershed, just like a floodgates coming down pretty soon.
Oh, listen, I can give you the roadmap going all the way back to Arkansas in the 1980s. I can give you the roadmap of all the things the Clintons have been up to, because the Clintons and Claire and I have been decisively engaged, ever since I got blacklisted out of Hollywood over the Vince Foster affair.
Well, people were very, very afraid of Hillary Clinton for good reason, because, look, as you mentioned before, many other podcasts that you've done about what happened to Vince Foster, and other people who may have said the wrong words, and apparently, like, Donna Brazil's got security cameras and all that, and she's in fear. Like, people know that she is like that character in the House of Cards, Kevin Spacey character, where something just bad is going to happen to you if you say something wrong to people in power. But because Hillary's career is, she's basically the biggest loser in political politics, they're pretty confident that she's not going to come back again, at least politically speaking. They feel more confident about speaking out against her. And so but I'm sure the reason why she's backing her words back now is because she's being threatened again, because these Clinton people
she may have woken up this morning with a horse's head in her bed, for all we know.
Well, that's exactly right. But the thing is, which every American person or everyone who cares about democracy and freedom across the world should understand, is that some things are more important than even your own life sometimes. The truth is even more important.
Absolutely.
If you're going to cut the cancer out of this whole situation, these people have to be exposed. Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt human being, in my opinion, since probably Lyndon Johnson.
I think you just insulted Lyndon Johnson. I would say Hillary is far more corrupt. I think she's the most corrupt politician in all of U.S. history at this point. So, we'll get her a little participation trophy, most corrupt, and we'll give it to her, and she'll feel okay, and maybe she'll go away. Okay?
We'll see what other people have confidence in coming out against her, but it's just great to see that finally we're seeing some movement here on the truth.
Yes, we finally are. And again, the denial of service attacks on my server are focused on those articles about the Clintons. The Epic of Clinton mess, the dead bodies list, Hillary spying, Vince Foster, and a whole bunch of others, all the way back to Mena, Arkansas, and the drug running that was going on back then. Anyway, Jeff, we're going to let you go. We got a bunch of callers waiting. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to shift on over to Clay in Alabama. Aloha, Clay. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been watching this Hillary thing. If this investigation really gains any steam and it becomes apparent she's going to be seriously investigated, I think Hillary will become very dead. That's what I think is going to happen.
Well,
if this is a serious investigation.
I don't think so, because I'm sure that Hillary has what are called dead man switches set up, where all of the information needed to destroy major careers is waiting in a remote location in trusted hands to be handed out to the press if something bad happens to her. People who play at that level of politics have dead man switches. Vince Foster had a dead man switch too, but his mistake was he kept his in his White House office safe, where the Clintons could get at it. And as a matter of fact, the Secret Service.
I remember that. I remember the Secret Service and Washington D.C. police just stood by and let her raid his office. I remember that.
Yep.
But I tell you, I wouldn't get on an airplane with her. Now, it would just be too dangerous.
Well, maybe, maybe not. I think the most likely outcome is that if it looks like Hillary's really going to come under investigation and could be convicted, the Clintons will just bug out. All of the key players are going to bug out. They're going to go someplace without extradition, and they'll leave behind their underlings, to be made example of.
Well, or underlings realize all that, but they realize she has no problem, no scruples about throwing them to the wolves.
No, in fact, I think Hillary's people right now are encouraging all this stuff about Hollywood's sex scandals and pedophilia to try and distract away from what's going on with Russiagate and Dossiergate and Primarygate. And I can imagine a lot of those liberals in Hollywood right now are starting to realize that Hillary is throwing them under the bus and destroying careers like Kevin Spacey's, to save herself. And that's a hard lesson to learn. When you think you're buddy-buddy with somebody who's politically powerful and you realize that you're just another one of their chips for the game.
Well, I think in the final analysis, Bill and Hillary just chips in the game for some very high-powered people that you never see on TV or read about or hear about.
I think they're pretty high up. That's why they've been untouchable all this time. They've got the goods. They can even blackmail the CIA over that gun and drug running thing in Arkansas.
Well, when you get on the bad side of the CIA, your life insurance rates will go up astronomically.
Yeah. Well, so, my experience with the CIA was very brief, and frankly, I wasn't all that impressed with them during that brief interaction here. Clay, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, if I had come up with something I feel is good news, I like to call.
Okay.
Now, CNN messed up big time, and that's good news. Also, I knew what Dossiergate was about, but the word dossier intrigued me. I did find time to look it up after I talked to you the last time, and it's very similar to a book, a bound collection of documents that refer to a particular subject or person or whatever it's about with a label on it. That's like a book. And given what I was thinking about Donna or the person, I wanted to know how the person who came up with some very damaging information for the bad side, that would expose things, how they would fare. And it looks like, to me, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, she's going to fare very well, and she might even have other people join her and back her up. Right now she's kind of floundering, and I think she was in hiding. And now she can kind of get her foot out of the door, and kind of look around. But she's going to be okay. Hillary, I never felt she was going to be in a 4x4 cell, fuming and slowly coming to a boil and all that kind of stuff. I think I said it before. But she will be under house arrest. I still think she's not going to be like she can be out there anymore. So, and I don't think her husband's going to be in the picture, so I don't know what's going to happen to him, if he'll die or what. But it's going to be a while.
He looks ill. Let's be honest. He looks very ill. And the speculation is that because of all of his catting around, that there may have been, he may have picked up something serious in terms of an illness, but he doesn't look well.
Oh, okay. Well, that validates that. Well, anyway, I just like to give my opinions because if it sounds like something people could hang some hope on it. We're rolling here.
Yeah, we're definitely on the cusp of major core changes to the United States of America. And that's why it's so hard to really double our efforts right now. Now's not the time to sit back and say, hey, we're making progress, because the other side is now desperate. They're scared. They're pushing as hard as they can to try and shove the American people back into the blindfolds and the earplugs and the gags. And so this is going to be a pitched battle, the truth versus the lies.
Yeah. And attacks on the media and attacks on your website and everything else is for sure. But I don't want people. I'm only interested in giving to you, actually, because if everything else fails, I want you to be able to keep going. You and Claire.
Yes.
Because you're an important voice, and you do it well, and your information's good, and you give us a chance to say things. And this is, I'm banking on you. With all due respect to RBN, I think you can correct me on that if you want to, but I just want to make sure people don't forget you and Claire. Because I don't want you going back to being a magician or anything. You've got to stay with what you're doing here.
Well,
yeah. Needed.
Well, at this point, I have abandoned any illusions that I might somehow return to a career in film and television. I have well and truly burned my bridges there. Plus, at my age, I just don't have the stamina to stand around a soundstage all day long. So that's just the reality there.
No, but Larry King went to 70, and and he's still at it. He's still on the radio. So there's that. Forget age. I'd pack it in.
Well, no, I get to sit down here.
Yeah.
I didn't get to do that on the set of Lost. I never got my own chair. I had to stand
know
up
how
there.
it is to be on a set.
Okay, Sherry, got to let you go.
Okay.
Sherry, got to let you go. Got to take a
Alrighty.
break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to our show. And yet another scandal is starting to surface from the Obama/Hillary administration. This is coming out of Judicial Watch, which has acquired internal Department of Justice documents that show there was a little bit of a scam being run. Companies that were sued by the Obama Department of Justice were given the option to cut their costs in half if they would donate money to left-wing interest groups handpicked by the administration, and they could get out of having to pay the government. This was mostly big banks, and it's a shakedown. We don't even know if some of these lawsuits may not have even really been valid. But the Department of Justice would go someplace and we're suing you, but you can get off the payment by donating half the payment, to these groups, and then you can take it off your taxes. And the new records obtained by Judicial Watch demonstrate a collaboration, which is another fancy word for a conspiracy, among high-level officials in the Office of the Assistant Attorney General and the Office of Legal Counsel to ensure that conservative groups did not receive any of the settlement cash. It was being funneled into these left-wing groups. So that's a new one that's just coming on out. Keep your eyes on Judicial Watch. They are doing fabulous work. They have been for decades, all the way back to Vince Foster's when I first became aware of them. Now, speaking of corruption and just how complacent the District of Criminals really is about this, as you know, Menendez basically is at the end of his trial for corruption. It's going to the jury. Now, you would normally think that if a member of the Congress were convicted of corruption, that would be the end of his career. And obviously Republicans in the Senate would like to try and expel the senator from New Jersey. But apparently Democrats are going to try and block it. And the Democrats are saying Menendez should stay in the Senate. Just because he's been convicted of corruption. I mean, how picky can you people be? Now, getting on back to the issues of the Democratic Party, which as long as they are still gene-spliced to Hillary Clinton, they are doomed. They're imploding. It's coming apart. And they've made too many assumptions. They certainly made too many assumptions last year about who was going to support them. And one of the demographics that the Democratic Party tends to assume are always going to vote Democratic are black women. And apparently, latest surveys are now showing that black women who used to form the most reliable base of support for the Democratic Party are now leaving. They're disillusioned. They're shocked and ashamed at what went down. Now, I don't want this to be a one-party nation like the Soviet Union was. I'd like it to be a multi-party nation, which was originally the blueprint in the Constitution. We weren't supposed to be just two parties. That was sort of created later on to try and lower the costs to the corporations to bribe all the candidates. Because if you only have to bribe two candidates to bypass the will of the people, that's much less expensive than having to bribe 8 or 9. Now, speaking of elections, as you know, there are currently elections today in Washington, Virginia, New Jersey, and New York. We're still waiting to see some results on that. Eyes are very much on the governor's race in Virginia because of concerns that this revelation about how the Democratic Party and Hillary basically stole last year's primary from Bernie Sanders to give to Hillary Clinton might actually tip that election over to the Republican candidate. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. All righty, getting on over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. The Syrian army has pulverized al-Qaeda positions in northern Hama, They're making great strides taking back their territory. And now, of course, everybody is having to deal with just what the United States is planning. Now that the Syrian war, at least as far as ISIS and Al-Qaeda is concerned, it's about over. More about that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about what's going on in Syria. And as far as ISIS and Al-Qaeda are concerned, the war is just about over. And now everybody's saying, what's going to happen now? Because among the various convoluted explanations of why the United States was in Syria was to get rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And now that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are basically on the verge of being driven out, Syria's government is now telling the United States, it's time for you to go home. But the indications are the United States still wants to stay. They're just looking for a reason the American people will fall for why they have to do that. And it appears to center on a plan to balkanize Syria. And even though the independent Kurdistan down in Iraq has failed, they're still looking at possibly breaking off part of Syria as a new Kurdistan. And the Kurds are backed by the United States. And so now it looks like the situation may escalate because a senior Russian commander stationed in Syria raised the possibility that the Syrian army would use the military option to regain control of the regions now controlled by the U.S.-backed Kurds in the northern parts of the countries. So that's what's going there. Okay, do we have a caller on the line? Yes, Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Listen, I'm calling actually about the topic you just finished, and I'm sorry that the timing is a little wrong, but about the Obama Justice Department shaking down companies to give to leftist causes.
Yes.
And this actually came out a couple of months ago, actually, and one of the things that he was shaking down about and where this money was flowing to, among others, were Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
I remember that.
And Obama was creating and has been creating, spent all that time shaking people down to create his own army, which he has used in the last year against Trump nationwide and in conjunction with George Soros. But that was funded as well by Obama.
Well, it looks like they probably wasted a few million of those dollars, last Saturday with that Antifa civil war that went nowhere.
Well, it does, but, for a whole year, nothing has gotten done, and Trump has been on the defensive, and all these spacious charges have been leveled against him, and all this, false revolution has been going on in cities all over the country. People have gotten hurt. This is Obama behind this, really.
Well, Obama definitely helped set up the funding mechanism, but I think ultimately it's Soros who's behind it. And we know, again, the leaders of Antifa actually went to the G20 to meet with leaders of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So this is definitely a global attempt to try and wreck nations and make them more open to the idea of joining a global coalition. But it's not going to happen. I mean, the pushback against the European Union is already building. There are people there seriously saying that the EU is not going to survive much longer. And so Soros, can just throw all of his money into this. It doesn't look like it's going to work. We don't want to be part of a single planetary population. We like having our own local community, our own local culture, our own local history. And, I mean, if everything's blurred together into the same shade of gray, that certainly will be the end of tourism. There isn't going to be any point traveling anyplace else on Earth because it's going to be the same fast food restaurants and convenience stores that you see everywhere else.
Well, Mike, I read all the stuff that was out there about the Black Lives Matter and Antifa meeting with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all that at the G20. I keep thinking to myself, what the hell are they doing at the G20? And why would that have happened? But nevertheless, there is a definite connection between Obama and Soros to these guys. And again, Obama has gone from being one of the worst presidents to the worst ex-president ever in 1 year.
Yes.
Fomenting all this trouble and all that. And the guy is scum and should be, if Hillary's under the prison, Obama should be right there with her.
I agree for a variety of reasons here, but I'm going to remain focused on Hillary for at least the immediate future. And but again, ultimately, at some point, somebody needs to do something about Soros. And apparently, Hungary is now looking at an investigation and possible criminal charges against him for a lot of what's been going on.
Well, I can understand why Obama would not go after Soros. Soros helped fund. He was the biggest fundraiser or a donor to Hillary and all that, and obviously their goals are the same, and Soros is probably pulling Obama's strings as well. But I don't understand why Trump does not invoke the Patriot Act and just draw a line through Soros's name and say this guy is funding terrorists, and under the Patriot Act, I'm going to make this creep disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, Soros reminds me of one of the characters in the Michael Caine movie, The $1 Billion Brain, and it was sort of like the final installment in what was called the Ipcris File franchise, and it was about this very rich billionaire who wanted to bring about war between the United States and Russia. Just all by himself. And I think the billionaire in the movie was played by Ed Begley, and Soros just reminds me of him. Just this idea that having billions of dollars gives you the right to play with the planet any way you want.
Mike, a couple months ago, maybe even a year ago, I remember you saying and making the best allusion, and Soros is like a James Bond villain.
Yes, absolutely.
Multinational guy sitting in his room like Dr. Evil,
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, listen, Peter, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Lenny in Los Angeles. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was calling about the Middle East and Hariri resignation, but I just want to peel back on Peter and to, bring in what you were saying is that every politician that's of the so-called Western capitalistic world is run by the same George Soros, who's run by the same Rothschild family. He doesn't even have the money that he claims to have. He knows that they're printing the money and giving it to him, and he's giving it to them and telling them what to do with it. Obama's not in charge of nothing, just like Hillary ain't in charge of nothing. All right? But evil is what evil does. But I'm going to get to Hariri and his resignation, his forced resignation, and you're having to rethink his intentions. I knew something was up, Mike, when he flew here to meet with Donald Trump, right when it looked like the ISIS was going to get the crap kicked out of him in Syria. Okay, and then Solomon flew and met with Israel back in September. I knew the game was afoot then. Okay, because they will not give up. They never give up. They always have a backup plan. Evil always has a backup plan. It cannot accept defeat by nature because by nature it is inherently evil.
Well, at some point, I mean, anybody who gets into a major conflict, when two countries go to war, both sides think they're going to win. But obviously one of them is wrong. And right now we're seeing a war between these globalists, image manipulators, liars, frauds, against the ordinary people of planet Earth. And I think, both sides think they're ultimately going to prevail. And I think the indications that we're seeing right now, certainly within Europe, within Hungary, within general public awareness of what the other side is, the plan is definitely faltering. It's stumbled rather badly in several places lately. But you're right, as long as Soros has got money, and apparently some of the money he's playing with isn't even his own anymore. Apparently he was getting some of that from other sources as well. But eventually they're going to run out of money, even the ones who've got the printing presses. Because if they just print up too much of that money, it devalues all the money out there, and it loses its potency as a weapon with which to try and manipulate the world.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We need to get rid of the people who are printing the money and who are putting up this illusion that you can buy bravery, you can buy debauchery. But here's the thing. I think you would know Sun Tzu better than me. I read some of his parts of his book. But I don't know if you read the whole thing, but you have to have the conviction of being right on your side.
Yes.
You're going to fight to the death in that sense. Okay, it doesn't matter. You're going to win even if you die. Okay, but, just to fight and to try and take other people's stuff, you're going to lose every time.
Well, it's not an absolute like that, but you are absolutely correct. Mercenaries aren't going to fight to the death. They're going to run because they want to spend that paycheck. They're not emotionally committed to the conflict, but they can be very well trained and very well equipped, and they can still be effective. But in the long run, when you're talking about all of the people of planet Earth who want to be free, who do not want to be part of a global private central bank or a global government or a global environmental authority, they're going to fight for their freedom, and they're going to be committed to that battle, because they don't want to see their children growing up as, for all intents and purposes, slaves of the New World Order. So anyway, listen, Lenny, we're going to let you go, and I need to get back to the news here because we're running out of time. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, interesting little article that came out over in governmentslaves.info is Netanyahu pushing Trump to war with Iran. And the instant I said that, read that, I said, this is in the category of do bears poo in the woods. Of course Netanyahu is pushing Trump to war with Iran. Israel has always pushed America into wars on Israel's enemies. Remember when they were starting the run-up to the war in Iraq? And yes, it was all about Saddam Hussein selling Iraq's oil for the euro. And then the cover story was weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, and it was all a lie. But Israel was right there on the sideline cheerleading them on, the pom-poms and everything going, go, U.S., kill Iraq. And yes, of course they are. They've been dreaming about war with Iran for a long time. Remember Senator McCain, that video of him going, bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, 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 Iran. And he's chuckling. He thinks it's funny as all heck to talk about bombing people. Now, once again, the head of the IAEA, Yukiya Amano, is out there giving interviews saying that Iran is totally in compliance with the P5+1 deal. And he's saying they have access to everywhere they need to go. They are not being kept away from anything. He's saying that this claim about these other military locations has been overly exaggerated. They already know there's not much of anything there. There's nothing there regarding nuclear weapons, which is what they're tasked to look at. Now, of course, Donald Trump is trying to say the deal was bad, even though most Americans think it's good. Certainly the other signatories to the P5+1, they think it's just fine. But Donald Trump wants a whole new deal that basically allows the U.S. to go into Iran and say, you can't have this missile, you can't have this tank, you can't have this, and you can't have that, because when we finally invade, we want it to be easy, we don't want to spend a lot of money and blood, and so we have to disarm you first. Now, right now, Trump has refused to recertify the P5+1 deal. He had no grounds to do it whatsoever. And he's dumped it on Congress to try and find a way to come up with a new deal that he, Donald Trump, will approve of. If Congress doesn't, then he's prepared to go the route of an executive order to simply pull out of the P5+1 deal. Now, interestingly enough, former Secretary of State John Kerry is warning the U.S. Congress that it would be extremely dangerous to reject the Iran nuclear deal. And Kerry told the Chatham House International Affairs think tank in London the decision was clearly made without relevance to any facts whatsoever, and criticized the involvement of Congress. Now, we know war with Iran is coming. How do we know that? Because once again, they're raising the specter of 9/11, and this time, Iran had a huge role in it. Iran had a much bigger role in 9/11 than the Saudis did, or Iraq did, or Afghanistan did. And of course, we now know that Afghanistan and Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, and Saudi Arabia was acting as a U.S. agent at that time. But that's the next thing. Oh, yes, Iran was behind 9/11. Don't think about it. Just take our word for it. Just think all that horror and fear and terror of 9/11 and just think Iran and everything will be just fine here. Now, the senior advisor to the Iranian parliament speaker, Hossein Emir Abdollahian, has warned that Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv are fomenting tensions to launch a war between Tehran and Riyadh And that's exactly what I was saying the other day when Saudi Arabia started talking about, oh, Iran giving missiles to Yemen is an act of war. And now they've dropped the idea that it might be considered an act of war. Now they've come on out and said, yes, it's an act of war. Iran has committed an act of war against Saudi Arabia by giving missiles to Yemen, who is already at war with Saudi Arabia. So they're going to use Saudi Arabia as a proxy to go into Iran the way they use Saudi Arabia as a proxy to go into Yemen. And here's where it gets really interesting. Somebody leaked a cable from Israel to all of their ambassadors around the world, confirming that Israel is working with Saudi Arabia to provoke a war. And basically this ties in with what's been going on over in Lebanon. Now remember, the Lebanese Prime Minister Hariri, who was supported by Saudi Arabia, was in Riyadh when all of a sudden he announced his resignation, saying that he feared an attempt on his life, as had happened to his father. And then all of a sudden Israel sends out this cable, demonize Hezbollah, and demonize Iran is engaged in regional subversion. And Israeli diplomats were urged to appeal to the highest officials in their host countries to attempt to expel Hezbollah from Lebanese government and politics. So they're ganging up. It looks like Lebanon and Iran is the plan B. They failed in Syria, but they're going to prove how butch they are going into Lebanon. And we know Israel still wants that Litani River. Israel wants all that water for Israel, and the Lebanese can go drink sand or something like that. But I'm not the only person who's saying that. Over at Blacklisted News, there's an article saying the same thing. Defeated elsewhere, the Saudi tyrant declares war on Lebanon. And so I'm having a rethink about Crown Prince Salman, that he may in fact be very reckless and dangerous, and he sees Saudi Arabia as an emergent power in the region, even though they have failed utterly in Yemen and Syria. If he thinks he can take on Iran all by himself, he's got a very nasty lesson coming. And the open question is, what will Russia do? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about how it looks like Saudi Arabia and Israel are going to try and gin up a new war against both Lebanon and Iran. And Lebanon has been in Israel's sights. Israel has invaded them numerous times, claiming that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Hezbollah exists to protect Lebanon from Israel. And Israel, it's long been known, one of Israel's major objectives in Lebanon is the Litani River, which would be a huge source of fresh water for Israel. And they have coveted that for quite some time here. Now, over in Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has basically come on out saying this is not the time to be challenging Hezbollah. And basically, Riyadh, the Saudis are saying Lebanon has declared war simply by having Hezbollah there. Obviously, Saudi Arabia's idea of what constitutes an act of war is a little more fluid than for the rest of us, but that's where they are. They're out there trying to make it look like they're under attack from Iran and from Lebanon. And, of course, they're not. Now, did Iran give missiles to Yemen? Possibly. But Yemen is at war with Saudi Arabia, and they have every right to be flinging missiles at the Saudis, who are bombing and starving their country. But what al-Sisi is basically sending a message is saying that if Saudi Arabia is about to ignite a regional war reaching from the Mediterranean over to Iran, he wants no part of it. He's basically telegraphing Egypt will be neutral. They will not take part in any war between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. That's what he's telegraphing. Now, the question is, what will Russia do? Because Russia has indicated previously that if Iran is attacked without justification by Israel, the U.S., or whoever, Russia will come to Iran's aid. Russia and Iran are trading partners. They're very close. We've already seen what happens when U.S.-backed forces go up against Russian-backed forces in Syria. It didn't end well, because the Russian military is very, very capable. In fact, it seems like Russia's military technology has pulled ahead of that of the United States. especially in the area of electronic warfare. So people are still trying to figure out what's going on over in Saudi Arabia, where Crown Prince bin Salman has arrested many of the royal prince's family members and many government ministers, supposedly for corruption. Now they're being detained in the Ritz Hotel. They're being treated very, very well for prisoners. And they're saying, what's going on? Were these people really corrupt? Probably at that level of government, almost everybody is. Was it because they were in tight with the United States? Or were they going to be resisting the new direction for Iran that Crown Prince Salman plans to take when he becomes the king? And it could have even been done, according to U.S. Army officer Todd Pierce in an interview in Sputnik, it was done to pave the way for an aggressive war against Iran. And then there's the money factor. As you know, following the... we'll get to this after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about what's going on in Saudi Arabia, where it's starting to play like an HBO miniseries on political darkness, like Game of Thrones, or for the other channels, Versailles, or the Borgias. And it's really getting dark over there, and they're trying to figure out what is really going on with the arrest of all these princes and ministers, supposedly for corruption. Consolidation of power, yes. Clearing opposition to a potential war with Iran, possibly. And then there's the money aspect. As you know, following that rather poorly thought out attempt to harm Russia with an oil price war, Saudi Arabia's economy got hit very, very hard. They actually started to issue government bonds to keep going because of that. And so now they're not as flush with money as once they were. Well, under Saudi law, if you are convicted of certain crimes, including corruption, the state acquires all of your wealth. And we're talking about $33 billion with a B dollars from some of these people who've been arrested. And that's a very Soviet thing to do. I mean, back in the days of Stalin, remember, you've probably heard the phrase, you know, this person was liquidated or that person was liquidated. They even used it in the Wizard of Oz in reference to the Wicked Witch of the West. But it actually began with a Soviet government operation, if you will, that would basically assassinate very wealthy people and confiscate their wealth, liquidate their assets. So that may be going on here as well. Now, we talked the other day about how a lot of these people who've been arrested were linked to Hillary and the Clinton Foundation, and now, according to this article in Blacklisted News, apparently many of them were tied in with the Podesta group as well. So once again, the focus comes back to that Podesta lobbying group, and as you know, John Podesta was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, the one she beat up the night she lost. His brother, Tony Podesta, has now stepped down as more questions are raised about just what the Podesta group has been doing. Does it go beyond merely lobbying to being an international fixer? Now, over at fortrus.com, they're looking at Hariri's resignation, and they're seeing it as a sign that the Saudis and U.S. and Israel are pursuing a Plan B, which may be to go into Lebanon, go into Iran, try and encircle Syria, and starve it into submission. But Turkey's a wild card right now. It's kind of hard to know what's going on. There's another article that came out over in Tasman News saying that Hariri resigned because he failed to carry out Saudi directions in basically Saudi's seditious plots in Lebanon. That's what he was assigned to do. Riyadh was backing him, and he failed. And there's even another article that came out of Fars News saying that Hariri is actually under detention in Saudi Arabia because he phoned in his resignation from Saudi Arabia. Nobody's seen him since, and Fars News is saying that he's actually under detention by the Saudis. That's definitely a dramatic turn of events. Meanwhile, the Saudi State Minister for Arabian Gulf Affairs is out there making war talk, saying, we will use all power to confront the party of Satan. So they're already calling down the religious imprimatur on everything they're doing. They even did it with the arrests of the princes and the ministers, saying it's the duty of every devout Muslim to fight corruption. And yes, that is in the Quran, but they're trying to basically sell the idea that what they're doing is holy and religious and blessed and so forth and so on. Meanwhile, we reported earlier in the week, actually yesterday, that Saudi Arabia has totally blockaded all of Yemen, all of their seaports, all of their airports, all of the land borders, and the United Nations today is saying that Saudi Arabia's decision to shut down all these access points is preventing the United Nations, and for that matter anybody else, from sending humanitarian aid to the war-torn country. So here we have Saudi Arabia imposing a starvation regime on the people of Yemen. And we're not talking about combatants. We're talking about ordinary people who are not part of the war, who just want to live their lives and be left alone. They are being starved into submission by Saudi Arabia, acting on behalf of the United States government. Now, here's an interesting article. This came out of the Real News. And it's talking about how several members of Congress have introduced legislation to invoke the War Powers Act with an aim to shut down U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, and accepting that the resolution will not pass because the vast majority of people in Congress like war. Well, let's give them all rifles and ship them to the front line, and that might change their opinion about how much fun war is real quick. Now, we're going to do a quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Steve Bannon is out there saying the Middle East is on a knife edge in the last 48 to 72 hours. He's certainly right about that. But then he goes on to say that President Trump and the United States of America have had enough of it, and we're just not going to tolerate anymore this financing, the exporting of radical Islamic terror into Western Europe and the United States. Well, Bannon seems to be unaware that the radical Islamic terror is blowback from endless U.S. meddling in all those Middle Eastern countries. Nobody gets up one morning and just says, oh, there's nothing on TV. I think I'll become a terrorist today. There's nothing better to do. People are made into terrorists by going about their business in their homes, down at the marketplace, getting food for dinner, and all of a sudden there's a blinding flash, and people they've known their entire lives, grown up with, been friends with, are lying in bloody shreds at their feet, and the shrapnel is stamped, made in the USA. That's what makes a terrorist. And Bannon needs to remember that. Because it is this endless meddling in other countries that has brought the world to the edge of World War III. And yeah, I can understand members of Congress think it's fun. They're probably heavily invested in defense contractors, and it's not like they or any of their families are going to be in any danger. Now, over in Israel, in East Jerusalem, which according to the United Nations is supposed to be Palestinian territory, Israel has made the decision to construct 300 new settler units in East Jerusalem. Just totally unconcerned with world opinion or the United Nations. Now, over in North Korea, commercial satellite imagery of the Pyongyang nuclear test site is showing significant movement of equipment, mining carts, material, and netting within the area of the West Portal. This is a yet unused test tunnel complex, and it hasn't been active for the last several months. But over at the North Portal, where they've been doing all the nuclear testing, and they had that recent cave-in, apparently a lot of that material has now been pulled off and moved around to the West Portal. So it looks like North Korea did anticipate having to have a second underground nuclear test facility. It's the same mountain, which is still risky to be pounding on that with nuclear bombs, But apparently they've abandoned the tunnel complex where all their earlier tests have happened, and they're working on a new tunnel complex over on the west side of the mountain. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Meanwhile, very bizarre story. This came out of TASS. The White House has issued a statement, Russia should have a role in resolving the crisis around North Korea. And apparently a spokesperson for the White House said that Moscow has obligations as a United Nations member to upholding UN Security Council resolutions. Well, Russia has always complied with UN Security Council resolutions. If you want somebody who refuses to comply, go down to Israel. But what's going on here is China is now pulling back. They don't want to get sucked into the North Korea mess that the U.S. has made with all this saber rattling and exercises off the coast. And so now the U.S. government is going to turn to Russia. Come on in, we'll whoop on North Korea, it'll be fun. Frankly, it reeks of desperation on the cusp of madness. And the other message about the UN Security Council is a dig at Russia for exercising its vetoes on U.S. resolutions. But Russia does have that right. And now the U.S. is starting to understand how the rest of the world feels when the U.S. will veto any Security Council resolution regarding Israel. But they're trying to convince Russia to just go along with us in North Korea and everything will be hunky-dory. But I don't think Russia sees it that way. Certainly, China doesn't see it that way. Now, here's an interesting article that came out in USA Today, and the headline is very alarming. South Koreans say war with North Korea, a life or death matter. But if you actually read the article, it says the opposite. And they're talking about this South Korean gentleman, Woo, who runs a survivalist website, and he's a consultant with local governments on how to prepare for disasters. And he's 44 years old, and he says he's trying to help prepare people for war, but he says most South Koreans aren't taking North Korea's threats seriously. Now we have another indication of why I don't think the United States can prevail in a conventional war against a military peer like Russia or China. And this time it's not the weapon systems, it's the personnel. And if you have not heard about it, you will now. This is called the Fat Leonard corruption scandal. And apparently it involves a Singapore-based maritime tycoon, Leonard Glenn Francis, who's nicknamed Fat Leonard. That's where they got that. And apparently this corruption scandal has now spread to include 60, that is 60, U.S. Navy admirals and hundreds of other officers within the U.S. 7th Fleet, which is already going through all kinds of turmoil from all these deadly ship collisions. So the Navy has confirmed it's been reviewing the conduct of 440 active duty and retired personnel for possible violations of military law or federal ethics rules in their dealing with Fat Leonard. And the Justice Department apparently handed them the cases of certain individuals who did not meet the threshold for prosecution in civilian courts, but may have committed offenses under the military justice system. Now, this is double the number of admirals the Navy said were under investigation last year. And 60, that's a lot of admirals. There are only 210 admirals presently on active duty in the U.S. Navy. So it's looking to me like the U.S. 7th Fleet is in serious, serious trouble. Their admirals are all corrupt, so are their officers. They're all, doing what they're doing. They've ignored training, which is why you had these warships, like the John S. McCain, that were being handed to crews who were not properly trained in the rules of maritime right-of-way, resulting in these collisions. Then you have the complaints coming off the USS Shame, which is part of the flotilla off the coast of Korea, where apparently the captain is turned into a Captain William Bligh, to the point where his crew absolutely hate him. They say it's like living on a prison ship. Boy, the Navy isn't what it used to be. Or maybe it never was. Maybe it's always been this corrupt. Now, story just coming on out. We reported earlier where Tucker Carlson had said his sources had reported that management at CNN were telling their prostitutes and their correspondents to just attack Donna Brazile. Apparently somebody at CNN has decided they've gone as far as they can go with it, because now CNN is admitting Donna Brazile's report is legit. And they're also reporting Hillary Clinton laundered money through the DNC back to her own campaign. Now, where did that money come from? Did it come from the Clinton Foundation? That's certainly not what the Clinton Foundation is chartered to do. If she used it as a slush fund, that voids the tax-exempt status of the foundation, and that makes Bill and Hillary Clinton personally liable for taxes on all that money that was collected. So even CNN is giving up, trying to protect Hillary Clinton any longer. This is going to accelerate. This is going to start accelerating. Now, as you know, yesterday we reported on the so-called Paradise Papers, which are these documents showing tax avoidance by the world's ultra-rich individuals and corporations, including the British Queen, Her Royal Highnessness. And the leader of Britain's opposition party, Jeremy Corbyn, is saying the British Queen should apologize if tax evasion is proven. Good luck on that one. But if what she did was illegal, there should be an arrest. See, here's the problem with all these billionaires and trillionaires and quadrillionaires and all these corporations evading taxes through these tax loopholes. It shifts the tax burden onto ordinary people who don't have enough money to take advantage of those loopholes. They're designed for the rich. They're not designed for you. That's why this is an issue. When anybody is using any kind of a tax loophole, because they've got a lot of money and they want to hang on to it, what they're doing is they're shifting the tax burden back to you. Because if governments can't tax the Queen of England, they'll raise taxes on the British subjects. It's inevitable as night following the day. That's how it works. Now, apparently the Paradise Papers have proven to be a bit of an embarrassment for Her Highnessness, because apparently her portfolio of investments includes the controversial retailer Bright House. Now, Bright House is a rent-to-own retailer, and they were slapped just a month ago, with a $20 million fine for not acting as a responsible lender. Now, the idea is that you would go on in and you would rent a new piece of furniture and so forth. And the idea was if you skipped the rent, they could just come and collect the item. They wouldn't have to go through any kind of collections or repossession. That's the rent-to-own business model here. But once you've paid enough months' rent, all of a sudden you own what you're buying. Now, the problem is the interest rates are sky high. And they're aiming their business at consumers who cannot access typical borrowing facilities. They're going for people with bad credit. And even worse, the Britain's financial regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, said the firm had actually overcharged customers and used aggressive sales techniques on customers with mental health problems and learning disabilities. And Her Highnessness thought this was a really great investment for her money. That one, I think, is probably going to take some of the luster off the crown jewels here. Meanwhile, apparently the world's largest gold producer, China, has seen production fall by 10%. So supply is starting to dry up. Demand is going up. That means gold prices are going to go up. I think it was 12-something this morning here. And as we get into the economic news, story coming out of Investment Watch blog, this is the broadest episode of extreme equity market overvaluation in history. In other words, those wonderful numbers you're seeing on the stock market, they don't represent something good, they represent something bad. They represent how far you have to fall in a correction. Overvaluation is a warning sign. They were seeing it all during 1929. Leading up to the Great Crash. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Paris in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just got a question for you. One, do you think we're really going to go into North Korea? And What's the timetable on it? When do you think they're actually going to make the move?
Could happen at any moment. Obviously, it won't happen while President Trump is there in the region, but after...
Highlands Preserve Parkway toward Galbraith.
Okay, we're hearing some kind of an echo back there. But as soon as Trump is back here in the United States of America, I would say at any moment. Right now, again, this government is desperate to get a real world war going before the economy crashes, so they got something to blame it on. Otherwise, we're going to basically blame Wall Street and Washington, D.C.
I believe the same. I think they're going to do it before the year's up.
Absolutely. We'll be in World War III for real before Christmas time. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, boy, they're starting to lay it on thick. I'm looking at the Fox News feed here right now. They've got one of their reporters literally at the DMZ in Korea, and they're showing all this footage of North Korean rocketry and artillery and saying that there's 1,500 pieces of artillery aimed at Seoul, South Korea, which, in my opinion, would be a good reason not to annoy North Korea. But they're laying it on real thick. And so, I think all of this stuff is going to be up and running by Christmas time. Because if the economy implodes and the U.S. government doesn't have a war to blame it on, then we, the American people, are going to blame Wall Street and Washington, D.C. for this economic predation that we've all been living under for all of our lives. Anyway. See, the problem is war is easy. You just go on out and kill people, take what you want. Actually finding something that works for everybody, that's hard. Powerful people, I guess they get lazy. They just say, let's just go to war. We got too many people anyway. Put them in uniforms, give them guns, send them over there. But again, the issue is, how far has North Korea gotten with a deployable nuclear weapon? Originally, they were talking about a decap strike. They were going to take out Kim Jong-un and the nuclear bomb facilities and the missile facilities all at once. Now the Pentagon is admitting that was ridiculous. They don't know where they all are. They can't. By now, Kim Jong-un has dispersed the bombs and missile components all over North Korea. And now they're talking about ground invasion in North Korea. And the butcher's bill is going to be enormous on both sides. I mean, if you look how bad it was during the start of the Korean War, this is basically the same war. They just took a very long pause, and now it looks like they're ramping it up here. The U.S. wants to finish it because they want to say they won the Korean War, which they didn't actually do. Now, over in Germany, getting back to the economic news, BMW has recalled 1 million cars over a possible fire hazard. And it's severe enough where they're warning their drivers to just park the car and not drive it until it can be fixed. And this affects the BMW 3 Series models from 2006 to 2011, with issues related to potentially faulty wiring of the climate control blower fan. Now, I'm a bit of a car file, if you will, going back to my youth, and I got it from my father, who liked really nice cars, and he had a BMW at one point. And back then, BMW, along with these other German car makers like Porsche, they were considered very good cars. They were simple, elegant. They hadn't gone the way of the American automakers, which were making huge, bloated, overly complex cars that broke down a lot. I remember my father had a Cadillac at one point. That thing was just a disaster. But the BMW was very, very nice. And I'm sad to see that even the best automakers in Europe are succumbing to the corporate mentality of value engineering their vehicles and relying on the name to convey the sales. Because you have people growing up saying, one day when I'm rich, I'll own a Porsche. One day I'll own a BMW. Or one day I'll own a Mercedes-Benz. And you start to realize that all you're buying with that money is just the badge on the car. The car itself is no different than what you're going to get from like Hyundai or Toyota or Honda, which Hondas are great. I've gotten tremendous service out of my Hondas. And when I'm finally able to get a newer car, it's probably going to be another Honda. And I don't care about the badge. It's because the Hondas really are built to last. And anyway, getting on back to the economic news. During Trump's campaign, he went on the attack against a tax break called the carried interest tax break that benefits some of Wall Street's wealthiest financiers, but the Republican tax bill released on Thursday doesn't mention it at all. It's still going to be there. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and it looks like things are definitely going to start happening. Fox News is all of a sudden running all of this Korea bashing. Korea's the biggest threat to the United States right now. And they've got this commander from the Military Pacific Command basically out there saying, yes, we've got the means to do it. And so it looks like war with North Korea is on. Now, right now, the military are facing a manpower shortage. And that means at some point in the very near future, they're going to start talking about activating the draft. Now, right now, young people are required to register for the draft. This has been going on for quite a long time. So all they got to do is basically say the draft is now up and running, and they're going to come grab your kids. And they're going to throw them into a meat grinder. In North Korea, in Iran, in Lebanon, in Syria, who knows where. All across Africa. So it's getting, unfortunately, all too real, and it does look like we're going to be in a major global conflict by Christmas time. All right, let's take a phone call here. Daniel in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Just wanted to touch base with that story you posted about Harvey Weinstein and some ex-Mossad agents running around Hollywood trying to intimidate some of his rape accusers.
Yes.
There was a company called Black Cube and Kroll and Associates, which they were the security detail for the World Trade Center on 9/11. Just wondering if you got a chance to read that.
Yeah, I did look at
article.
it. I did look at it, and it's it's very alarming that they're using ex-Mossad agents to go after these people.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Harvey Weinstein thing, it seems like it pales in comparison to Arnon Milchan, the admitted Israeli spy who's another Hollywood producer.
Yes.
And I kind of been doing a little bit of homework on him, but I'll probably phone you one of these days. I got some stuff that I had translated from Hebrew. Kind of been working on for about 8 months now.
Okay.
Anyways, I think you're right about keeping focus on the whole Hillary thing and all these scandals. And this thing with George Stephanopoulos interviewing Donna Brazil.
Yes.
Like this guy's the last person to do that, to interview. He's not a journalist. I mean, he's an ex-Clinton staffer, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
He
yes.
also gave $75,000 to the Clinton Foundation, and he's like trying to make it like Brazil's, off her rocker. I'm surprised he didn't call her a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But yeah, the corporate media definitely they're on the warpath against her. They're still trying to protect Hillary Clinton. But the fact of the matter is, with all these allegations out there, she's politically dead. She's never going to win an election again, and she can't get close enough to steal it. And I think what's probably going to happen, she may still have dreams that there's going to be some kind of a violent uprising with Antifa that will get Trump and Pence out of the Oval Office and put her in. But at this point, I would have to say she's probably delusional. And I think we have to start questioning her mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole Democratic Party is in danger. I mean, they know that it's all over for her. The whole thing with Bill Clinton and this Lolita Express and what's his name, Kevin Spacey. I mean, it seems like the media will touch on it a little bit, but not the corporate media. Like Fox News might touch on it.
Well, no,
but,
the corporate media. No, the corporate media has gone on to the Weinstein story. I mean, it doesn't hurt them to do the Weinstein story. And again, I think Hillary's people are encouraging this because they're hoping that a Hollywood sex scandal is going to draw the attention of the American people away from Primary Gate and Dossier Gate and Uranium Gate and what's the new one, Scam Gate over at the Department of Justice we talked about earlier in the show. But I think most people are astute enough to not fall for that tabloid misdirection any longer.
Exactly, and like they're wagging this latest shooting in Texas, and like if you want to know who's the all-time, who's got the record for all-time kills in a Texas church, it's Janet Reno.
Yes, absolutely. Boy, did you hit that one on the head.
Just one quick note about Saudi Arabia, because it's not all bad. Women are allowed to drive now, so they can make it to their own stonings on time now. It's absolutely fantastic.
Tacky, very tacky, very tacky.
All right, take care, Mike. Good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Michael, talk about Weinstein. I don't know if you heard that Weinstein's actually was paying Israeli intelligence to protect, to protect him to go spy on all these women.
Well, wait a minute, Tom. No, he wasn't paying Israeli intelligence. He was hiring a company that was made up of former Israeli intelligence operatives, including former Mossad. But they're now a private company.
Right.
They're not.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's be accurate here.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, that's right. Okay, well, they are former Israeli intelligence, Mossad and all that. Okay. But, yeah, Mike, the reason I did call the show today is because have you touched on anything about that Corey Feldman, what he's been trying to say has been happening for years in Hollywood?
Yes.
And how Corey's feeling that he's being threatened and all that, and how they overdeed his buddy there, Ham, and, I believe a lot of stuff that young guy is saying there. Well, he's not that young anymore, but I believe what he's saying is basically true. And he called it a black star or black angel or something in Hollywood. I don't understand basically what he's talking there. They never elaborated, but what's going on in Hollywood is unbelievable. That it's and like you're talking about Hillary. Look what Hillary's getting away with as far as not letting Bill Clinton take a DNA test against Danny Williams.
Yes.
And you don't hear about that in the news anymore, Michael, because if that story ever got out, that would be in the Democratic Party. Because once they would have proved that Hillary is telling Bill, if you give Danny Williams any money, I'm going to, who knows what she would do, because, look, we don't want to go there because we know what, I don't think Bill and Hillary's touched each other in 30 years, but it's not for me really to know, but this guy's with other women, and he's going out on cruises to the Twin Island with some other guy that does
Jeff Epstein,
young girls and all that.
Jeff Epstein.
Yeah, Jeff Epstein, and yeah, right. So, I just think that now that the last gentleman just called in, he's absolutely right. The corporate media is not going to touch it because it's going to blow the roof off. If the story ever came out that Bill Clinton was the father of Danny Williams, it was proven, and he actually had to pay back child support. It would be all, if the media reported on that, it would be unbelievable what happened.
Well, again, the corporate media is still, we're starting to see some desertions, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and now apparently CNN is pulled back from attacking Donna Brazile and saying, yeah, actually what she said really did happen. So I think everybody's kind of sick and tired of the Clintons at this point. They're just trying to figure out how they can disconnect without Hillary, going nuclear and blowing the whistle on everything the government's been doing for the last 30 years. There was at one point where somebody claimed that Hillary was literally saying, if I go down, everyone goes down.
Yep, right. Yeah, that's true. Look, another thing, Michael, look at this Anthony Weiner. This guy Anthony Weiner is doing, 21 months now or something in some kind of medical facility?
Something like that.
Guy Weiner. If that would have been anybody else, they'd be doing probably 5 years, and they'd probably be doing hard time. It's just unbelievable. And another thing, that's Uma Abedin. If the FBI were to really interrogate her, I'm sure they'd get the more information they could handle, and they'd probably try to cover it up anyway. But this whole thing it's just unbelievable what's happening with the left, and it blows my mind. I look what's going on in, like today they have the election in Virginia with this guy Gillespie and some other nitwit. And they, you know, in that situation alone, this guy's basically sanctuary cities. I'm still lost in that more than anything. These sanctuary cities. I don't get that one, Michael. Sanctuary cities, and these people are here illegally.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
why do they have sanctuary cities for people who are bank robbers?
You raise an interesting point there, but again, all of these are violations of Title VIII, and all of these governors and mayors who are out there saying we're going to be a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city, they need to be arrested and charged under Title VIII. Use the existing laws.
Needs to be arrested.
Yes, absolutely.
Gary Clown needs to be arrested. If I was Donald Trump, I'd arrest him. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, right now, Donald Trump needs to get himself an attorney general who's actually going to do the job. Because right now, Sessions is just another follow-on to Loretta Lynch, totally corrupt, totally compromised. And I think it should be really obvious. There's a serious problem with our government when we get two attorney generals in a row who are protecting the most corrupt politician in our history, when you have two FBI directors in a row who are protecting the most corrupt politician in our nation's history. And you realize there is a big, big problem. And Donald Trump needs to start firing people and replacing them with individuals from outside the Beltway. You cannot drain the swamp when you're hiring the swamp. And that's Trump's biggest mistake. There are very qualified people out here in the hinterland. They've never been in politics. They're not compromised. They're not owned. They're not bought. But they know the skills to do the job. Get Larry Klayman in there as a special counsel or as attorney general. And just start bringing in these outsiders. Trump is an outsider president. He should have brought in an outsider White House staff, and we would see things happening.
I totally agree with you on that, Michael, totally. And I think he should get rid of Sessions because Sessions is, he just seems like to me a big failure. So
well, Sessions is out there. Sessions is recusing himself
right.
from all these investigations. Well, you know, if you're not going to do the job, have the decency to resign. Tom, we're going to let you go here. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. We're coming up here on the end of the program. Thank you for the phone call. Getting on back to the economic news, there's an article out saying that Obamacare is officially dead. Maybe a little premature, but basically what it is Donald Trump has apparently prepared an executive order to unravel Obamacare's individual mandate. He's putting it on hold to see whether the GOP tax plan will eventually include repealing those penalties for going uninsured or having an insurance policy that is not Obamacare compliant. But apparently, if Congress fails to put that into the tax reform, Trump is going to go ahead and use his executive order to get that one out. All righty, getting on over here to Europe, and once again, George Soros, founder and owner of the Open Society Foundation, was finally able to meet with the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. And it was a closed-door meeting with no announced agenda. In other words, it's all secret what they're talking about. And I'm sure Soros' concern is that the European Union, which is an essential stepping stone to the global government, is starting to fall apart. You've got Great Britain is trying to leave. You've got Catalonia is trying to leave. Now you've got Lombardia and Venice in Italy. They want to break away. And it's all starting to fragment. And it's because of the economic predations of the European Central Bank and the backlash to the open borders migrant crisis. And, of course, Soros is pushing, let more migrants in, let more migrants in. When they're the majority, the indigenous Europeans will shut up and sit down. Meanwhile, following the potential loss of Brexit, that's still up in the air, the EU is trying to push east and grab more nations there, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And that, of course, is going to be seen as a threat by Russia. Now, apparently Germany is now on the brink of a second election because Angela Merkel is not able to form a coalition government based on the last election results. They are still deadlocked over the migrant issue. And Daniel Günther, who's Minister President of Schleswig-Holstein, said that a snap election, a second snap election, would be a disaster for the country. Actually, it would be a disaster for Angela Merkel, because she tried to soften her stance on the migrant issue during the campaign, but once the election was over, she went right back to her hardline open borders agenda, which means a new election will be worse for Merkel as a result, because they know she was lying to them. Now, Berlin politicians are calling a special meeting over fears that organized Arab criminals have now infiltrated the local police force. So how's that open borders immigration thing working out for you there in Europe here? Somebody leaked a German military report that shows Germany's top military planners believe the EU will break up sometime before the year 2040. Now, Austria has just appointed an anti-EU foreign minister. That's a slap in the face of Jean-Claude Juncker. And apparently, Iceland has reversed its earlier moves toward joining the EU. There were two surviving pro-EU parties. They didn't do well in the elections. And today they've basically dropped their agenda of trying to force the joining of Iceland with the EU because of the huge public opposition. Anybody looking at what's going on in Europe realizes it's a raw deal to join the EU. It's more money for the bankers. It's more territory to make it look like the EU is growing. But for the ordinary people, it's been a raw deal from beginning to end. Now, there was this teacher who was caught on video at an Antifa rally physically assaulting people. And basically a few weeks ago, Judicial Watch filed a California Public Records Act request. That's the state version of the FOA. And they filed a request with the Berkeley Unified School District to obtain information about this teacher's violent Antifa activism. And apparently the teacher is now suing the school district to stop it from giving Judicial Watch these records. Got something to hide? Like maybe she was being paid by Antifa? Antifa seems to have a lot of money. They certainly blew a huge wad of it last Saturday with all those newspaper ads for their civil war, which went nowhere. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today, and I want to spend it talking about some new developments in that Texas shooting, because obviously the gun grabbers thought they were going to have a field day with this until it turned out that a former NRA instructor, Stephen Williford, stopped the shooter with his AR-15. And so they can't go on the warpath against, we've got to ban all these military rifles, because if there had been a ban on guns for law-abiding citizens, and it turns out the church gunman shouldn't have been allowed to have a gun in the first place because of his Air Force record, and the fact that apparently he was in a mental hospital for a while, and on prescription psychiatric drugs. And he would have been allowed to just keep doing what he was doing because there was nobody else around there to stop him. So Stephen Williford is the hero, basically grabbed his AR-15, challenged the shooter, actually did shoot him, and had a high-speed chase down the highway until the shooter basically bled to death. But he's being hailed as a hero with his AR-15. It isn't guns, it's people. People are going to be good or bad, and they will be good and bad with whatever is at hand. A gun, a hammer, a knife, a foundation, a voting machine. Donald Trump is out there saying he's opposed to any new gun laws, and he says the problem is mental health. Guns aren't to blame here. Mental health is to blame. And apparently, this Kelly, back in 2012, was in a mental hospital, described as a danger to himself and others. And apparently he'd been sneaking firearms onto Holloman Air Force Base, attempting to carry out death threats he'd made on his military chain of command. So how did this guy get a gun? See, here we have a case of the existing laws weren't enforced. The existing systems broke down. Adding new laws and systems isn't going to solve the problem. And once again, the gun grabbers are out there saying, all you gun enthusiasts, you're all evil people. No, we're not. We're good people. We just like putting holes in paper targets. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the show, Harvey Weinstein employed former Israeli agents as part of his effort to spy on and suppress the allegations by women who have accused him of sexual assault and rape. And apparently we are getting word now that indictment for rape is about to be handed down. So that's going to be very interesting. But actress Aiea Argento was saying that, yeah, that's a reason why so many women stayed silent. They knew they were being followed. They were being monitored by these former Mossad agents, and they were afraid. They were terrified. There was, it's sort of like Hillary's bimbo squad, only with more teeth. And so, yeah, they were scared. That's the way it works. You abuse somebody, they don't go along, you send thugs after them. There's the music. I got to get on out of here. I got an interview over at Reluctant Preppers to get to. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it everywhere, especially Russiagate, Dossiergate, Primarygate. Keep that out there. We will force the corporate media to deal with this honestly and accurately. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.